I bet 9 out of 10 people out there have heard of this little show called VeggieTales. When you think of a Christian children's show, this has to be the first thing you think of. Otherwise, what's it gonna be? Bible Man? Gigi? Bible Man again? Starting production in 1993 in a Chicago basement made by just a couple guys, VeggieTales soon exploded into a multinational phenomenon. This is what all Christian parents try to show their kids to teach them tales of biblical morality. There's a reason it stuck too. The guys behind it, Phil Vischer and Mike Naraki, knew that you can't just talk about God to make a show good. You have to make the characters lovable, you have to make the writing snappy, and most importantly, you can't talk to people like they're idiots. They may be children, but they're not stupid. It's for all those reasons that VeggieTales is still around today. I mean, it went through some ups and downs, like some serious downs, but for the most part, it's still number one in the market. Mostly because everything else in that market isn't really good, per se. Sure, VeggieTales is successful today, but back in the early 2000s, it was unstoppable. It was growing like crazy. And like every company that's on the fast track to success, Big Idea saw dollar signs and decided to expand their business, doing more than just VeggieTales and going into new creative venues, most of them still involving VeggieTales. But one of them had next to nothing to do with VeggieTales. This wouldn't star talking vegetables, but talking penguins. I think you all know where I'm going with this. So let's sing a little song with 8 little words about a rocket ship and flightless birds. We're talking about 3-2-1 Penguins today and how it was a big failure. Despite the fact that a lot of children love the show and people still revisit it fondly to this day, it was not a success when it came out. Well, technically it was, but also technically it wasn't. See, when it first came out, the first episode, Trouble on Planet Wait Your Turn, was hyped up into oblivion. Keep in mind, this is still in the middle of Vegemania, so people were ready. And when it came out, Trouble on Planet Wait Your Turn sold like gangbusters. But then the second episode, Cheating Scales of Bulamanka, sold about half as much. And then the third episode sold half of that, and then the fourth sold half of that. You get where I'm going with this. The more episodes came out, the less the show was selling. That is a very bad sign and a clear indication that you're doing something wrong. But the show couldn't have been doing something wrong, right? It got good reviews and kids loved it, they still love it to this day. So what happened? What made 3-2-1 Penguins fail like this? I think I have a pretty good idea, but for those of you who don't know what 3-2-1 Penguins is, well, let me introduce you. It's the story of two twins, Jason and Michelle, and they will be very quick to tell you that they're not identical twins. They're spending the summer at their grandmother's house, and they find this little toy spaceship and 4 ceramic penguins, and this causes them to go on wacky adventures. See, the penguins are either alive or the kids are having daydreams. It's never really explained, but one way or another, the penguins and one or both of the twins go on Star Trek-esque space quests filled with morality tales and parallels to whatever situation they're dealing with in their day-to-day lives. So in short, it's basically Star Trek meets VeggieTales. Already that sounds like a crazy concept, and you know what? That doesn't stop with just the premise. Look at these planets they go to. I will explain them and you tell me whether or not this sounds normal and mundane. A barren wasteland filled with vacuum cleaners who are constantly waiting in line to view a telescope. An evil carnival on a distant moon that turns people into seeds of discontent that when launched on other planets cause such chaos that it forces everyone to evacuate. A little tiny planet filled with little tiny dart people where every time they tell a lie, their moon gets closer to crushing them into smithereens. Creative concepts to be sure, and I gotta say the animation is able to pull it off pretty well. It's not as primitive as, say, the early VeggieTales stuff, although it is far from Pixar. Still, especially for the time, it's quite nice to look at. A lot of time, effort, and creativity went into all this. Worlds and environments can only carry you so far. How are the characters? They're not the most fleshed out in the world, but they're pretty good. Jason and Michelle are your standard boy and girl twin kids. Zigil is the captain with a big ego problem. Sound familiar? Hint, I mentioned Star Trek earlier. Midgel is the down-to-earth pilot/engineer, Fidgel is the brainiac scientist, and Kevin is the lovable goofball comic relief. On their own they'd be fine, but their dynamic is what pushes them into excellence. They have some great chemistry, no matter the occasion. Okay, looks like we're all set here. We got some good characters and some pretty impressive environments. How's about that snappy writing that Big Idea is known for? Well, 3-2-1 Penguins does deliver. And in fact, it's got some laugh out loud moments, even for me, a 20-something, who, by the way, is most certainly not the target audience for this thing. Don't believe me? Take a look!
Now remember, one chewy chunky glob of fudge bar, sugarless, some barbecued lard chips, and a slimy slurp. Extra slime.
They were out of a chewy chunky glob of fudge, so I got you an icky gooey slab of slop.
It's not the same.
Funny, you don't look like the king.
I lost weight. And I shaved my mustache. And had my nose shortened. And I'm wearing contact lenses, which is why I no longer wear glasses.
Your Majesty.
Having writing that doesn't make you want to blow your brains out is actually one of the best things a children's show can have, Christian or otherwise. It makes the parents who are watching the show with the kids have a good time too. And if the parents have a good time, they'll be more willing to show it to their kids. And that means more profit. So it's always worth putting in. I'm not talking about Animaniacs level of innuendos or wink wink nudge nudge know what I mean jokes. But simple interactions and character dialogue will really spice the whole experience up. So this sounds pretty good, right? With all that I said, 3-2-1 Penguin sounds like a real winner. Well, there's one thing missing. And sadly, this missing piece is perhaps the most important thing that a Christian children's show can have. The lessons. That's not to say that 3-2-1 Penguins wasn't educational, it was, but only in the most bare basic terms. Simply put, 3-2-1 Penguins does not know how to teach biblical lessons. And that's amazing because a lot of the people that worked on this also worked on VeggieTales, or at least in close relation with them. It came from the same studio after all, and Tim Hodge, one of the executive producers, was one of the main guys on VeggieTales. Now, it's one thing to say something doesn't work, but it's another to prove it entirely. Let's take a look at each and every episode, closely examining their lesson. I'm gonna give the lesson in full detail as the episode teaches it. I won't add or subtract anything. Trouble on Planet Wait Your Turn is about patience, and the lesson is, be patient because it's nice and God wants you to. Cheating Scales of Bolomanka, the lesson is, well, not cheating. And the lesson is, don't cheat because it's bad and God doesn't want you to. The Amazing Carnival of Complaining's lesson is, guess what, don't complain. And the lesson is, don't complain because it's bad and God doesn't want you to. Are you noticing a pattern yet? Runaway Pride on Light Station Kilowatt really shakes things up. It's a lesson in not being prideful, and the lesson is, God tells you not to be prideful, so don't be prideful. Wow, really different. Doom Funnel Rescue barely talks about its lesson, but I guess it's supposed to be sharing? And that one is the same thing. God says it's good to share, so try to share. And then finally, Moon Menace on Planet Tell-A-Lie is lying is bad and God says you shouldn't do it, so don't do it. It seems like when it came to making 3-2-1 Penguins, everyone put so much effort into the writing, the characters, the worlds, even the animation, but then they forgot to construct a lesson, so they decided to staple one in at the last minute. Now obviously, they had a lesson in mind, otherwise the worlds wouldn't have turned out like this, but they didn't think about how they'd present it. 3-2-1 Penguins is not a Christian show first. It's a Christian show like 8th, behind things like making money or entertaining people. And there's nothing wrong with entertainment, but when you bill it as the next VeggieTales, people are gonna expect something different. Speaking of VeggieTales, let's take a look at how they do their lessons. Let's see if you can notice a few differences here. Their very first episode, Where's God When I'm Scared, is all about facing your fears. You have nothing to fear in this world because God is far bigger than any monster or politician that could come around and ruin your life. All you gotta do is stand with him and he'll make sure everything's okay. When you're in a fight with him, you're gonna win. It may take some time, sure, and things might not always look pretty, but you got nothing to worry about when you're with God. Josh and the Big Wall has one of my personal favorites, taking a more complex lesson and boiling it down to a simple level for kids. God may ask you to do some strange things. They may not make sense to you, but they make sense to him. He can make a lot of things happen through nothing. So stick with him and he can do wonders through you. And it may not happen immediately, but just stay true to his orders, and everything will work out. And they even managed to teach such juvenile lessons like sharing in a good way. Sharing may give you less possessions, but it will give you more friends and more happiness in the end. Besides, God gives us a lot of blessings for the sole purpose of sharing them with others. There's no use keeping them all to yourself. That's only gonna brood contempt for everyone around you. I don't know if you noticed some differences, but I sure did. Let me point them out. For one thing, VeggieTales isn't always the same template with a couple nouns switched here and there. They talk about the lessons through multiple angles, and they take the time to make sure that the kids understand it in the various different ways that it can be applied. All without being too preachy, might I add. And secondly, this is the big one here, God is a very big staple in their lessons. 3-2-1 Penguins, not so much. It's always God says not to do it, so don't do it. It never says why. VeggieTales does, thus making it a satisfying Christian children's show. Take it from me, someone who's acting in and writing for a Christian children's show, simply adding God in, superfluously, is not gonna cut it. He's the main selling point. He's the thing you'll be advertising. He's the reason that the families who are gonna be interested in your product are gonna seek you out and give you a try. Let me tell you something about Christian parents. If you don't give them what you promised them, they're gonna get a little, how do I put this delicately, Karen-y. And that's what happened with 3-2-1 Penguins. It was nowhere near as complex or intellectual, dare I say, as VeggieTales was, and the lessons fell flat. That's why the parents wanted to show the kids this in the first place. So those who gave the first episode a try and were disappointed decided not to buy the second. Those who were disappointed in the first episode but still decided to give it another try and were disappointed by that one too decided to skip the third, and so on and so forth. The lessons were 3-2-1 Penguins' own undoing. It didn't take a genius to see that if you cut God out from 3-2-1 Penguins, it would be basically no different, and that is the most egregious thing a Christian children's show can possibly do. Let me put it this way. Do you guys remember when NBC's Cubo aired reruns of VeggieTales and those brand new original episodes of 3-2-1 Penguins? For VeggieTales, they cut God out as much as possible, and with the new 3-2-1 Penguins episodes, he just wasn't even mentioned. With VeggieTales, it always felt off. It felt like there was something missing, especially when it came to the lesson. It felt incomplete. 3-2-1 Penguins wasn't lacking in that department. Cutting God out from it didn't really change anything. Granted, those episodes were not very good considering the fact that the entire tone was different and the writing was far less good, but that's a story for another day. And I think you get the idea from here. 3-2-1 Penguins really had its priorities all mixed up. It's telling that VeggieTales was made to be a ministry from the very beginning and then it happened to be a success. Meanwhile, 3-2-1 Penguins was made to be a success, and it wasn't one because it wasn't a ministry. And Phil Vischer, one of the creators of Big Idea, actually acknowledged this himself in his autobiography, Me, Myself, and Bob, which I recommend that you check out. It's a really good read. He mentions that at the time of 3-2-1 Penguins coming out, his dream was to be the Christian Walt Disney, having this massive media conglomerate that all revolved around teaching God's values. And that's really, really telling here. I may enjoy the show. I think it's a fun watch, but I do not think it is a good ministry. It is basically no different from any Disney Jr. or Nick Jr. show out there. On the lesson front, that is. And that is why I believe 3-2-1 Penguins was not successful. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What do you think of 3-2-1 Penguins? Do you think my idea has some merit to it? Comment below and let me know because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time.